The blackout never announces itself gently. It arrives like a blade through the fabric of normal life. Swift, silent, final. 1 second your world hums with invisible power, and the next it is stripped bare, revealing how fragile your modern certainty truly was. Screens fade to black. Machines sigh into stillness. Every device you trusted becomes lifeless in your hands, as if the entire technological world simply decided it was tired of pretending to hold you up. What vanishes isn't just electricity. It's the illusion that help is always nearby, that someone somewhere is monitoring the grid, fixing the failures, keeping everything stitched together. You realize, with an ache deep enough to feel physical, that the safety net you depended on was never woven for catastrophes that don't fix themselves. The silence after the collapse is heavier than darkness, because the old world taught you to fear inconvenience, but not to fear the absence of rescue. You feel it almost immediately, the shrinking of the world. Rooms grow colder, water stops flowing, food begins its slow countdown toward decay. You stare at dead technology like it owes you something, like it should explain why it abandoned you without warning. The truth is simpler and sharper. The old world had always been temporary. You just never had to confront what lived beneath its polished surface. The raw mechanics of biology, the unblinking laws of physics, and the fact that nature has no interest in your comfort. The blackout doesn't just take your power, it takes your assumptions. It takes the quiet belief that someone else, somewhere, is keeping the lights on. And as you stand in that new darkness, surrounded by machines that no longer remember their purpose, there is only one thought left that feels real enough to hold. No one is coming. What happens next is entirely up to you. Rural life was never meant to be glamorous. It was slower, quieter, rougher around the edges, a place where progress arrived late and left early. You spent years watching city skylines glow on the horizon like distant promises, wondering if you were missing out on something bigger. But now, as the silence deepens and the grid lies dead across the continent, the truth rises like dawn over your land. Everything the world once mocked you for has quietly become your advantage. While cities choke on their own dependence, elevators frozen, keycards useless, water pumps silent, you stand on soil that still remembers how to take care of the people who respect it. Out here, distance becomes a shield. The nearest crowd is miles away. The nearest panic, even farther. The chaos unfolding in glass towers and suburban cul-de-sacs feels like it belongs to another planet entirely. Your land hasn't changed. Trees still stand. Wind still moves. Water still finds its way downhill. The fundamentals that civilization tried to outgrow remain loyal only to places like this, where nature was never negotiated with, never ignored, never paved into submission. You start seeing your surroundings differently. The patch of woods behind your home is no longer just scenery. It's fuel, shelter, material. The muddy creek that once felt like a nuisance is now a lifeline waiting to be understood. The open sky above you becomes a calendar, a warning system, a promise. Rural life doesn't hand you survival for free. It's not magic, and it doesn't guarantee anything. But it gives you the one thing the collapsing world has stolen from almost everyone else: the ability to breathe, think, adapt, without a crowd pressing in from every side. It grants you space to make mistakes that won't immediately cost you everything. What once seemed behind the times now stands firmly ahead of the crisis. Here, the world may be ending, but it is ending slowly enough for you to learn how not to. The first true shock of the blackout isn't the darkness, it's the thirst. You turn the faucet out of habit, expecting that familiar rush, but nothing comes. Just a hollow click in the pipes, like the house is clearing its throat, before dying. In that moment, you realize the cruel irony of rural living, the well you bragged about, the pure groundwater you told city friends about is nothing more than a deep hole without the electricity needed to pull water from it. The pump, once invisible in its reliability, has become a silent monument to your dependence. So you step outside, and for the first time in far too long, you actually listen. No hum of appliances, no traffic. Just the soft, persistent sound of moving water somewhere beyond the tree line. A sound you used to ignore because it belonged to a world you didn't need until now. The creek looks nothing like the pristine water bottles lined up on your old pantry shelf. It's cloudy, messy, alive in ways that make your stomach tighten. But survival forces you to relearn truths you once memorized for a school exam and immediately forgot. Water doesn't have to be pretty to be pure. It just needs science and fire. You remember the basics. At 212 degrees Fahrenheit, water stops pretending to be polite and begins to boil with volatile rage. Microbes die, parasites surrender, viruses unravel. But boiling alone doesn't solve everything. Not when minerals, metals, and invisible contaminants could turn every sip into a gamble. So you take it one step further. You boil the creek water until it becomes steam, then capture that rising vapor and let it cool. Distillation, something humanity mastered long before electricity, returns crystal clear droplets to your waiting container. The impurities stay behind like unwelcome guests who finally take the hint. What condenses is as close to pure water as nature allows. In that moment, crouched over a pot balanced on a rough-made fire, you understand something crucial. Rural life gives you access to the raw materials of survival, but not the instructions. Those you must earn through sweat, patience, and trial. The water won't come from pipes anymore. It will come from your hands, your attention, and your willingness to adapt. The creek becomes your teacher. The fire becomes your laboratory, and you, whether ready or not, become the last guardian between thirst and endurance. Hunger arrives slowly, politely at first, the way a storm warns the horizon before it decides to tear the world apart. Your refrigerator, once a quiet guardian of abundance, has become nothing more than a glowing box of decay. The freezer, your old safety net, is now a slow motion disaster, each hour melting another layer of security. All the conveniences that used to buy you time are now racing against you, and they are winning. But step outside, and the world looks different than it ever did. From behind a kitchen counter. Out here, food doesn't come wrapped in plastic or lined up in neat aisles. It stands in the open air, disguised as weeds, trees, roots, and stubborn green life that never cared whether a power grid existed. Dandelions, which you once cursed for ruining your lawn, suddenly reveal themselves as a full-body meal. Roots bitter but rich, leaves sharp with nutrients. Flowers capable of becoming tea, wine, or a brief reminder that nature still has sweetness left. The oak trees dropping acorns across your yard become something more than seasonal clutter. They are tiny stores of carbohydrates, waiting patiently for someone who remembers or relearns how to make them safe. The tannins inside them may wage war on your stomach, but repeated soaking washes that thread away, leaving behind calories that last for months. And then there are the cattails, the overlooked giants of muddy corners and half-forgotten ponds. In a world that measures everything by utility, cattails shine like a miracle. Their roots cook like potatoes. Their young shoots snap like cucumbers. Their pollen becomes flour, bright and golden as sunrise. The entire plant is an edible blueprint for survival. Food shifts from something you buy to something you notice, something you study, something you earn. There is patience in foraging, a kind of quiet negotiation with the land. You test. You wait. You learn the rhythm of edibility the way ancient people once did. Cautiously, respectfully, understanding that the wrong bite could end you faster than starvation. The universal edibility test becomes your prayer, your ritual, your slow dance with uncertainty. And at night, as traps wait in the brush and snares rest in the silence, you realize something essential. Nature never promised you abundance, but it offers opportunity. If you're willing to watch carefully, move deliberately, and eat with both knowledge and humility. The supermarket is gone, but the land has always been open. You were just too full, too fast, too modern to see it. Cold is not just a temperature, it is a predator. It waits patiently in the walls of your house, in the cracks of your windows, in the spaces you ignored when the world still offered central heating at the push of a button. When the blackout settles into its second night, you finally understand what rural people whispered about long before electricity made everyone forget. Heat is not a luxury. Heat is survival. Your house, once warm with humming systems and artificial comfort, begins to reveal its true nature. Every draft becomes a threat. Every unsealed gap becomes a thief, stealing warmth molecule by molecule. You feel the cold peeling away your confidence, reminding you that nature never agreed to play by your rules. But rural land gives you something cities cannot. Fuel scattered everywhere like unclaimed treasure, fallen branches, dead trees, thick logs lying quietly beneath layers of moss. Where urban survivors claw at furniture and tear apart floorboards for firewood, you stand before forests that have been storing energy for decades. You only need the skill and the humility to unlock it. Fire is simple, but not easy. It demands respect. It demands understanding. It demands patience. Most people forgot how to cultivate. You crouch beside your first real survival fire, not the controlled, recreational kind you made on cute camping trips. This one matters. You learn how fuel, oxygen, and heat dance together, how removing any one of them turns the flame into a faint, dying memory. You begin placing rocks behind the fire, using the land itself as a reflector, bouncing warmth back toward you instead of letting it escape into the night. The difference between clever and careless becomes the difference between warm sleep and shivering through the darkness. The house transforms. You seal cracks with old shirts, newspapers, leaves, anything to stop moving air from stealing what little heat you create. You shrink your living space, turning one room into a cocoon instead of trying to warm the entire structure. Small spaces heat fast. Small spaces stay warm. And for the first time since the blackout began, you realize you are learning again, not just surviving. Rural life is not forgiving, but it is generous. It rewards effort. It rewards ingenuity. It rewards those who accept that comfort must now be built, not switched on. Tonight, the fire doesn't just warm the room. It warms your resolve. A quiet flame against the vast cold pressing in from every side. Darkness changes everything. Not the soft kind you get from switching off a lamp, but the absolute swallowing dark that pours into a house when every source of light dies at once. It feels heavier. It feels older. It feels like it has been waiting centuries for electricity to finally step aside so it could reclaim its territory. At first, you think you can handle it. You tell yourself your eyes will adjust, that your phone's last sliver of battery will get you through the night. But when that final glow fades and the darkness becomes total, a truth hits you harder than hunger or cold ever could. Humans were never built for this. Your mind begins to invent shapes. Your pulse becomes louder than your thoughts. Silence grows teeth. You need light. Not for vision, but for sanity. And without electricity, you turn to what your ancestors used long before wires carried comfort across continents: fat, fire, and time. It's shocking how quickly the old methods return to you. The bacon grease you used to dump carelessly down the drain becomes precious fuel, A scrap of cloth becomes a wick. A small metal container becomes a lamp, capable of pushing back the dark for hours. You watch the flame flicker, steady itself, and then hold, like a companion choosing to stay awake with you through the night. And suddenly, the room changes. Shadows shrink, corners soften. The world feels smaller, safer, almost human again. You learn more. Alcohol burns cleaner. Oil burns longer. Even sunlight can be stolen, focused through mirrors or magnified through glass to pierce shadows or spark flames. You become a student of light. Because every minute you hold on to illumination is a minute you hold on to hope. The blackout teaches you something that the old world never bothered to mention. Light is emotional. It shapes your thoughts, your courage, your ability to push through the next hour. Darkness breeds despair. Light, even a tiny flame trembling on a wick, becomes a declaration that you are still here, still trying, still unwilling to surrender the night. In the end, the lamp you craft with your own hands does more than brighten the room. It brightens something inside you, a reminder that even when the world collapses, you can still make your own dawn. When the world was still humming with electricity, tools were conveniences, things you bought, misplaced, replaced, and forgot. But after the blackout, tools become something far more ancient and personal. The extensions of your own hands, the line between helplessness and capability. Your garage, once a cluttered afterthought, transforms almost overnight into a survival workshop. You begin to see everything differently. The broken shovel you meant to fix last summer is no longer trash. It's raw material. The rusted plow blade gathering dust in the corner becomes steel, waiting for a second life. Even the tangled copper wire you kept for some project someday suddenly feels like treasure. Out here, surrounded by silence and necessity, you rediscover physics not as a science class, but as salvation. A 6-foot branch becomes a lever, granting you the strength to move stones that used to mock your muscles. A rope looped over an overhead beam becomes a pulley, turning impossible lifts into manageable tasks. Simple machines reveal themselves as ancient allies you never took seriously until now. Sharpness becomes a kind of currency. Glass, stone, metal, everything can be shaped, chipped, or struck into an edge. You break a bottle the right way, and its crystalline fracture becomes sharper than any kitchen knife. You strike a stone against another, and shards peel away in clean, vicious angles your ancestors used to build entire civilizations. Primitive skill suddenly feels modern again. You improvise without hesitation, because hesitation doesn't exist in a world that refuses to wait for you. You strip leaf springs from abandoned equipment and turn them into dependable blades. You twist copper wire into snares, strong enough to feed you while you sleep. You learn to see the hidden structure of every object, the potential under the rust, the purpose beneath the years of neglect. Every tool you create or repair becomes a quiet declaration. That collapse hasn't turned you into a victim, that scarcity hasn't stolen your ingenuity, that the world may be broken, but you're not. Rural life doesn't hand you perfect solutions. It hands you possibilities, and it trusts you to turn them into survival. Electricity once felt like air, everywhere, invisible, effortless. You never thought about where it came from, because it was always there, humming through walls, waiting behind every switch. But when the blackout settles in for good, you realize something almost embarrassing. You were never generating power. You were only borrowing it. Now, with the grid silent and the sky offering no mercy, you face a new question. How do you bring energy back into your world when the age of convenience has died? The answer isn't in solar panels or backup generators anymore. Those relied on a civilization that no longer exists. Instead, you turn to motion, the most ancient, reliable form of energy the world has ever known. You start with what you have. An old bicycle frame becomes the heart of a hand-cranked generator. Pedals turn into your new power plant. Every rotation pushes electrons through coils like livestock, driven through narrow gates. The progress is slow, almost insulting compared to the old world. But it's real. You can feel it in your legs. You can hear it in the faint buzz of life, returning to a battery you thought was forever dead. Then you move to the land itself. The creek that gave you water now becomes a power source. With scavenged wood, metal scraps, and hours of stubborn effort, you build a water wheel that turns with the relentless push of the current. No software, no maintenance schedules. Just physics, pure and honest, spinning a makeshift generator that provides a steady trickle of electricity. Enough for a small light, enough to charge a device. Enough to remind you that civilization isn't the only thing capable of making power. And the deeper you go, the more the Earth reveals. Two different metals immersed in salt water create their own tiny battery, a trick so old it feels like sorcery. Aluminum and copper plates, a jar of brine, and suddenly you have voltage born from chemical tension. Not much, but enough. Enough to matter. Then there's thermoelectric energy, a slab heated by fire on one side and cooled by water on the other. The temperature difference forces electrons to migrate, creating electricity from nothing more than contrast. Hot and cold, arguing with each other in a language you can harness. It's not the kind of power that once lit cities or pushed trains across continents. It's quiet power, stubborn power, human-sized power. But in this new world, that is more than enough. Rural life doesn't promise unlimited energy. It promises something better. The ability to create what you need with your own hands, your own land, and the principles of nature that never stopped working. Not even when the grid did. When the internet dies, it dies without drama. No error message, no warning, no final flicker of connection. One moment, the world is a vast map of voices, opinions, signals, and noise. The next, it collapses into a silence so complete, it feels like pressure on your chest. Your phone becomes nothing more than a smooth piece of glass. Your computer becomes a dead monument to a world that relied too heavily on invisible threads. But communication doesn't disappear. It simply falls back to its oldest, rawest forms. Ones the modern world forgot, but the rural world never fully abandoned. You start with radio. Long before you ever cared about frequencies or antennas, there were people who understood that radio waves don't need infrastructure. They only need space to travel and someone stubborn enough to listen. Ham radio operators, those hobbyists the world teased for decades, become the new librarians of human connection. With a simple rig, some wire, and a bit of luck, you can push your voice across miles of broken land. You can hear others trapped in the same darkness, calling out into the static like survivors, shouting across an endless sea. CB radios and walkie-talkies rise again too. Channel 9 for emergencies, Channel 19 for travelers. Code words that once felt outdated suddenly become the only organized language left in the ruins. But not every message can cross miles. Some messages only need to cross a field, a hill, a tree line. Signal fires become your analog broadcast system. Smoke in the day, flames at night. One fire, safe. Two fires, danger. Three fires, help now. Mirrors flash coded sunlight across valleys. Bright, flickering bursts that carry meaning to anyone watching from the right vantage point. For the first time in your life, you understand why ancient armies depended on them. You learn Morse code the same way you've been learning everything else since the Blackout. Urgently, a dot becomes a heartbeat. A dash becomes a breath. SOS begins to feel less like a distress call and more like a mantra. The whole world is whispering at once. And in the quiet moments, when even radios sleep and the night settles heavy around you, you realize something profound. Communication was never about speed. It was never about convenience. It was always about connection, the human instinct to reach out, to be heard, to not vanish into the silence. The old ways are slower, yes, but they are sturdy, they are honest, and they do not fail simply because a transformer halfway across the country decides to melt. In this new world, your voice travels on wind, fire, metal, and patience, not on wires. And somehow that feels more real than the internet ever did. In the old world, security meant locks, passwords, cameras, layers of protection built on the assumption that danger was rare and help was close. But after the blackout, those assumptions die quickly. People change when hunger gnaws at them, when water runs out, when the lights never come back on. Civilization softens humans. Desperation sharpens them. Out here in the rural dark, you learn the oldest rule of survival. Your safety is no longer guaranteed by society. It is guaranteed by your awareness. Your property transforms into a perimeter, one you must know as intimately as the lines on your own hands. Every path, every ditch, every tree line becomes part of a mental map you walk again and again until you can navigate it blind. At night, that knowledge becomes your first defense, because you cannot guard what you do not understand. Early warning systems rise from scraps and creativity. Tin cans strung across a trail, branches arranged so they snap under weight, loose gravel placed where footsteps shouldn't be. None of it is high-tech. All of it works. Barriers matter too, not to stop determined intruders, but to shape their movement. Fallen logs, dug trenches, narrow passages near choke points. These slow threats down. Funnel them where you want them, where the odds tilt quietly back in your favor. Even predators, human or animal, are vulnerable when forced through a predictable path. And then there are the guardians nature provides. Dogs that bark before danger reaches the yard. Geese that scream at anything unfamiliar. The nighttime forest itself, which carries sound farther than any alarm ever could. But perhaps the most important skill in this new world is concealment. Not just hiding yourself, hiding what you rely on. People don't steal what they can't see. A home that appears picked over and unimportant becomes a shield far stronger than bravado. In the daylight, you practice blending in, letting the world think you have less than you do. At night, you move softly, fire low, windows covered. You learn the discipline of silence, the discipline of shadows. Security isn't about winning fights. It's about preventing them. Because in this world, your neighbors aren't enemies. But famine can turn them into something unpredictable, something tragic, something dangerous. Out here, safety is a habit, and survival is the art of staying unseen, prepared, and calm enough to face the night without becoming part of it. The collapse of the grid wounds the body, but it attacks the mind long before hunger or cold ever reach you. When the routines of the old world disappear, your thoughts become a battleground. Days lose their shape, nights stretch out like unbroken oceans. Without schedules, alarms, appointments, or the comforting rhythm of a society running around you, time becomes something slippery and dangerous. That's when you learn the truth. No survival manual ever explains clearly. Your psychology is the real front line. If your mind falls, everything else follows. So you build structure where chaos used to live. You wake with the sun, not because it's poetic, but because your body understands natural light better than electricity ever did. You work until dusk, not out of discipline, but because the human spirit needs forward motion to stay sane. Tasks become anchors. Collecting wood, checking traps, tending fire, maintaining shelter. Each one is a victory. a small defiance against the weight pressing down on your thoughts. You begin to celebrate the quiet wins, a clean pot of distilled water, a meal gathered from land that once held no meaning for you, a night where fear didn't take around your spine. You count them not out of sentimentality, but because your brain needs proof. Proof that effort still produces results, that tomorrow is still worth walking toward. And then there's isolation. In the old world, solitude was something you paid for in vacation rentals or sought for peace. In the blackout, solitude becomes a lingering shadow, whispering doubts in the corners of long nights. Humans are not built for endless aloneness. Even the strongest minds unravel in silence. So you seek others, not to create dependence, but to create belonging. Two people sharing work can accomplish what one person fears. 3 can build systems. 4 can build a life. Community becomes a psychological medicine, just as vital as clean water. You share stories, knowledge, tools, and the fragile warmth of human presence. You trade warnings about the weather, about strangers, about the land itself. You laugh together, not because the world is funny, but because laughter is a rebellion against despair. Humor becomes a survival tool. Jokes about the absurdity of the new world, sarcasm about your own mistakes, a shared grin when something actually goes right. It releases tension the way a pressure valve releases steam. And in the quiet moments before sleep, when firelight dances across the walls and exhaustion finally softens your thoughts, you understand something profound. Survival is not just about enduring the physical world. It is about protecting the fragile architecture of your own mind. If your thoughts stay steady, you can rebuild anything. If they crumble, even abundance won't save you. When the hospitals fall dark, they don't become ruins. They become reminders. Reminders of how much you once relied on strangers in clean coats, bright lights, and machines that hummed with sterile precision. In the blackout, all of that disappears. The nearest emergency room is now nothing more than a building full of equipment that will never turn on again. The responsibility for your survival and the survival of anyone beside you shifts entirely onto your shoulders. Medicine becomes personal. You start with the fundamentals because they matter more than any miracle cure the old world once offered. Hygiene, simple, boring, overlooked hygiene becomes your first and strongest weapon. Clean hands, clean water, clean tools, clean wounds. In this new reality, infection is the quiet killer stalking every misstep, every careless scrape, every neglected cut. A minor wound, the kind you used to ignore, now demands ceremony. You wash it with boiled water. You remove dirt with steady, careful hands. You bind it with cloth you've sterilized in heat, not trust. You watch it every day, because infection blooms fast and kills faster without antibiotics. Then comes the medicine the land still remembers. Plants you once walked past without a second thought become the ingredients of your new pharmacy. Willow bark eases pain and lowers fever. Aloe cools burns and soothes torn skin. Echinacea strengthens the body's defenses in ways pharmaceuticals used to simulate. The knowledge feels ancient, not because it's old, but because it demands respect, demands accuracy. Using the wrong plant isn't a mistake. It's a sentence. So you learn slowly, carefully, double-checking every leaf, every stem, every root. You become a student of color, smell, texture, because the forest does not label its medicine, and it does not forgive confusion. You prepare poultices. You mix teas. You dry herbs in the faint warmth of your fire. You memorize which plants heal and which plants harm, because the stakes are no longer theoretical. And in the absence of modern tools, you rediscover the importance of simple techniques. Pressure to stop bleeding, Elevation to slow swelling. Heat to draw out infection. Cold to tame inflammation. Rest, real, uninterrupted rest, as the most powerful healer of all. The blackout doesn't make you a doctor. It forces you to become a caretaker, one who works with patience instead of pills, observation instead of diagnostics, instinct sharpened by necessity instead of formal training. Medicine becomes not just a practice, but a mindset. Stay clean, stay aware, stay humble, because in this world, the smallest wound can end you, but the smallest skill can save you. The weather was once a small inconvenience, something you checked on your phone while sipping coffee, something that might delay a delivery or ruin weekend plans. But after the blackout, weather becomes an adversary with teeth. There are no forecasts now, no radar maps, no glowing icons predicting what tomorrow will bring. You step outside, look up, and realize the sky is your only meteorologist, and it speaks a language you must relearn quickly. Clouds stop being scenery. They become warnings. High, thin, cirrus whisper that change is coming. Low, heavy stratus creep across the land like a hushed threat. Towering, cumulonimbus rise like mountains, promising storms that can tear apart the unprepared. Wind 2 becomes a messenger, a sudden stillness before dusk, a warm gust in the dead of winter, a shifting current that tells you the land is inhaling before something breaks loose. Your senses grow sharper because your survival depends on noticing what you once ignored. Every season carries a personality sharp enough to kill. Summer bakes the land until water becomes precious as gold. Spring tricks you with warm mornings and freezing nights. Fall demands labor. Harvest, store, prepare. Or winter will punish your laziness without mercy. Winter is a test the land gives without apology. It strips heat from your home, strength from your body, and days from your margin of error. Storms become battles you fight with preparation, not bravery. You reinforce the roof. You board or brace windows. You store firewood higher, drier, farther from danger. Every storm finds the weaknesses you missed, and every mistake reveals itself with brutal honesty. Nature offers no gentle reminders, only consequences. Temperature becomes one of your most dangerous adversaries, cold, numbingly slow, stealing clarity and movement, heat silently deadly, turning sweat into salt-crusted dehydration. You discover that your body can only live in a very narrow range, and everything outside that range feels like an attack. And yet, there is a strange clarity in all this. When you watch cloud gather water from the ridge, when you feel pressure shift in your bones, when the birds go silent before a storm, you begin to understand the rhythm of the world in a way no weather app ever allowed. Weather no longer serves you. You adapt to it. You respect it. You brace for it. You learn to move with its patterns or suffer beneath its force. Because in the rural dark of a dead grid world, the sky is no longer a backdrop. It is the most powerful presence you live beneath, and it will decide your fate whether you're paying attention or not.